Ren shivered as he stumbled through the icy wasteland. The wind cut through his thin suit, and each breath felt like fire burning in his lungs. The planet had no name on any map he had seen. Its frozen surface stretched endlessly in every direction, and the sky glowed a pale green that made the ice shimmer strangely. Ren's spacecraft had crashed 3 days ago, leaving him with nothing but a small pack of supplies and the hope that he could survive long enough to be rescued. His hands were numb, and his legs felt weak, but he could not stop. Every step through the snow was a battle. He had to find shelter before the next storm arrived. The howling winds carried a strange, high-pitched sound, faint but urgent. Ren stopped, straining his ears. It sounded like a cry, small and weak, almost like a child calling for help. He scanned the horizon and noticed a small cave partially hidden by a ridge of ice. The sound seemed to come from there. Ren's heart beat faster. He did not know what was inside, but he could not leave it there. Survival was important, but helping another life was even more urgent now. Ren pushed through the snow, his legs trembling with cold and exhaustion. The wind tugged at him, but he kept moving, determined. When he reached the mouth of the cave, he saw 3 small shapes huddled together. They were pale, almost glowing in the dim light, and their bodies were covered in fine, white hair. They were shaking violently, their tiny limbs trembling with cold. Ren carefully approached, speaking softly. "Hey, it's okay. I'm here to help." He took off his gloves and gently wrapped them around one of the creatures, trying to warm it with his own hands. The hatchlings made soft squeaks but did not resist. They seemed to understand that Ren was not a threat. The creatures were albino aliens. Their eyes were large and silver, reflecting the faint light in the cave. They had small, delicate wings folded against their backs and thin tails that twitched nervously. Ren had never seen anything like them. He realized that without help, they would not survive the night. Using his jacket, Ren wrapped the 3 hatchlings together, creating a small bundle of warmth. He noticed how fragile they were, how small and vulnerable. Despite his own weakness, he felt a surge of determination. He would not let them die. Ren moved them carefully back to his spacecraft. The landing pod had been damaged, but it still had a small enclosed area that could provide shelter. He cleared the snow and gently placed the hatchlings inside, setting up a temporary nest with his jacket and some soft cloths he had salvaged. The hatchlings huddled together, trying to absorb every bit of warmth. Ren melted some ice using a small heater from his pack and offered them tiny sips of water. They drank eagerly, making soft, happy sounds that filled the empty cabin with a strange kind of life. Night fell, and the temperature dropped even further. Ren wrapped himself around the small bundle of hatchlings, trying to share what little warmth he had. He could feel their tiny bodies trembling, but he refused to give in to despair. He whispered words of encouragement, even though he knew the hatchlings might not understand his language. As he lay there, Ren noticed something remarkable. The hatchlings began to respond to his voice. One of them, the smallest, lifted its head and looked at him with wide silver eyes. The eyes were full of trust and curiosity. Ren felt a connection he had never known before. It was as if they were telling him that he was not alone, and neither were they. The storm outside raged, but inside the small spacecraft, a fragile warmth grew. Ren took turns warming each hatchling, shifting his position so that none of them suffered too much from the cold. He realized that his own suffering was nothing compared to the responsibility of keeping these small lives safe. By the early morning, Ren was exhausted. His body ached, and his fingers were stiff with cold, but the hatchlings were alive and breathing steadily. He allowed himself a small smile. He had survived the first night, and so had they. As he watched them sleep, Ren thought about the future. He did not know how long he could stay on this planet, but he knew he could not leave these hatchlings alone. They had no chance of survival without him, and he could not abandon them. They had already begun to depend on him, and he had begun to depend on them in ways he did not yet understand. The hatchlings stirred slightly, sensing Ren's presence. One reached out with a tiny hand and touched his arm. Ren felt a surge of warmth in his chest. Despite the cold, despite the hunger, despite the danger, he felt hope. These small creatures had given him a reason to fight, a reason to survive beyond himself. Ren settled against the wall of the spacecraft, wrapping himself around the hatchlings as best he could. He whispered again, "We will make it. Together, we will survive." Outside, the wind howled and the snow swirled, but inside the tiny shelter, life persisted. The day passed slowly, each hour marked by careful attention to the hatchlings' needs. Ren melted more ice for water and rationed his small supply of food. He made soft, gentle noises to comfort them, and in return, they responded with chirps and tiny gestures of trust. Ren realized that their survival depended not only on his strength but on his patience and care. By evening, Ren had grown weak, but he refused to lie down completely. He had to monitor them, to ensure that they stayed warm and safe. The bond between human and hatchlings grew stronger with each passing hour. Ren began to understand that they were not just creatures in need of protection. They were companions, allies, and perhaps, in some small way, friends. As the cold night settled in again, Ren whispered, "Rest now. We have each other, and we will face the cold together." The hatchlings huddled close, their silver eyes reflecting trust and gratitude. Ren closed his eyes for a brief moment, feeling the warmth of their small bodies against his own. For the first time since the crash, Ren allowed himself a spark of hope. The frozen planet was dangerous, unforgiving, and lonely. Yet in the small bundle of albino hatchlings, he had found a reason to survive, a reason to endure, and a reason to continue fighting the harsh world outside. The cold night stretched on, but Ren and the hatchlings were not alone. Together, they had survived the first day. And together, they would face whatever the frozen planet had in store for them next. The morning light filtered through cracks in the spacecraft's hull, painting the icy interior with a faint green glow. Ren stirred, his body sore from the long night, but he felt a strange warmth as he looked at the three albino hatchlings. Lumi, Fex, and Nari were awake, their silver eyes reflecting curiosity and trust. They huddled close to each other, then moved toward Ren as if sensing he had been their protector through the cold night. Ren smiled softly. "Good morning, little ones. Did you sleep well?" He reached out gently, and Lumi stretched a tiny hand to touch his cheek. The gesture made Ren's chest swell with a mix of pride and tenderness. He had never expected to feel such a connection with alien creatures, but here it was, undeniable and real. The hatchlings chirped softly, a language Ren could not understand, yet it carried emotion. He began to interpret their sounds as greetings, curiosity, and even a small kind of playfulness. Ren had survived alone for years in various parts of the galaxy, but nothing had prepared him for this. These creatures depended on him completely, and in return, they gave him companionship he had never known. Ren carefully distributed small portions of his rations. He had only enough to last a few more days if he rationed strictly, but he could not deny the hatchlings their share. He melted ice for water and watched as each of them drank eagerly. Fex clumsily tipped over a small container, and Ren chuckled softly, catching it just in time. The little moments of normal life brought a strange comfort, a reminder that even in the harshest worlds, life could persist. After the meal, Ren examined the spacecraft for damage. The crash had left several systems offline, including the heating unit. He knew they could not survive long without warmth. Using spare metal plates and wires, Ren tried to build a makeshift heater. He worked slowly, careful not to disturb the hatchlings, who had begun to follow his every move with intense curiosity. They climbed on small shelves and peered at his hands, clearly learning from his actions. Nari, the smallest of the three, reached toward a dangling wire. Ren gently pulled her back. "Not yet, little one. This is dangerous," he said kindly. Even in danger, the hatchlings trusted him, and Ren realized the depth of responsibility he carried. They were fragile, small, and completely dependent on him. Yet they also had a spark of intelligence that made them almost human in behavior. By midday, Ren had managed to rig a small heater using the energy cells from the spacecraft. It emitted a weak but steady warmth, enough to keep the hatchlings comfortable. Lumi immediately curled close to it, Fex explored the wires cautiously, and Nari watched Ren with wide eyes, clearly fascinated by his work. Ren felt pride in their response. It was as if they understood he was trying to make life better for them. With the heater running, Ren decided to venture outside briefly to search for more supplies. The ice storm had calmed, leaving a clear path for a short distance. He wrapped himself in layers and carried a small container for collecting ice or any other resources he might find. The hatchlings followed him to the doorway, chirping softly, as if warning him to be careful. Ren smiled at their protective instincts. The cold outside was biting, and every step was a struggle. Yet Ren moved with determination. He collected chunks of ice, small metal scraps, and anything else that could be useful for repairing the spacecraft. The hatchlings, though too small to help directly, followed him back to the cabin, their eyes constantly on him. Ren realized their obsession with him had already begun. They watched his movements, mimicked his gestures, and even chirped softly when he paused. Once inside, Ren set the collected materials on a makeshift table. The hatchlings immediately examined everything. Lumi nudged a piece of metal with her tiny nose, Fex tapped on the ice with his tail, and Nari climbed over scraps to explore the container. Ren laughed quietly. Their curiosity was insatiable, and it reminded him that even in extreme survival situations, life could find joy in discovery. As evening approached, Ren began teaching the hatchlings simple routines. He showed them how to drink water safely, how to huddle near the heater for warmth, and how to avoid touching dangerous wires. They learned quickly, mimicking his movements almost perfectly. Ren realized that these creatures were extraordinary. They were not just surviving, they were learning, adapting, and beginning to form a bond with him that went beyond simple dependence. The night fell again, and Ren wrapped himself around the hatchlings once more. This time, however, it felt different. They no longer trembled as violently. Instead, they pressed close, trusting his warmth and protection. Ren whispered to them, "You are safe now. I will not let anything happen to you." They responded with soft chirps, pressing their tiny bodies closer. Ren felt a deep connection, a fragile bond that made the icy planet feel slightly less hostile. As he watched them sleep, Ren thought about what had brought him here. He had traveled to this planet on a mission of exploration, unaware of the dangers. Yet now, stranded and struggling, he had discovered a new purpose. The hatchlings had given him a reason to fight through the cold, to endure hunger and exhaustion, and to keep going when despair threatened to overwhelm him. He remembered his own loneliness before the crash, the endless solitude of space, and realized that the hatchlings had filled a void he had not known existed. They were more than companions. They were a new family, fragile and dependent, yet strong in their trust and curiosity. Ren felt a surge of determination. No matter the harshness of the planet, he would protect them. He would keep them alive. The night was long, but Ren did not fear it as much as before. He had learned the hatchlings' patterns, their needs, and their ways of communicating. He could anticipate when they were cold, hungry, or scared. In return, they anticipated his movements, following him, observing him, and learning from him. The bond between human and alien grew stronger with each hour, a fragile thread of trust and loyalty in a world of ice and danger. By dawn, Ren was exhausted, but the hatchlings were healthy and alert. Lumi stretched her wings slightly, Fex explored the small cabin, and Nari climbed onto Ren's shoulder, chirping softly as if greeting him. Ren smiled, feeling hope rising in his chest. They had survived another day together, and the bond between them had deepened. Ren whispered, "Tomorrow we will find more ways to stay safe. Together, we will face this planet, no matter what it brings." The hatchlings chirped in response, pressing closer for warmth. Ren realized that he was no longer alone. In this icy wasteland, he had found trust, friendship, and a reason to keep moving forward. The fragile bond had formed. The human and the albino hatchlings were no longer just survivor and dependents. They were companions, learning from each other, protecting each other, and preparing for the challenges that awaited them on the frozen planet. The frozen planet was quiet in the early morning, but Ren knew that silence could be dangerous. He had learned over the past days that the calm often preceded storms or other threats. The hatchlings, Lumi, Fex, and Nari, were already awake, chirping softly as if anticipating the day ahead. Ren smiled at them and stretched carefully, feeling the stiffness in his muscles. He needed to move, repair, and prepare. Survival required constant effort, and the hatchlings had become his silent companions in the struggle. Ren decided it was time to explore beyond the immediate vicinity of his crashed spacecraft. Supplies were running low, and the small amount of energy in the ship would not last forever. He packed a small container with water, rations, and a few tools, making sure the hatchlings were safe in a bundle inside his jacket. They chirped excitedly, sensing the adventure and trusting Ren completely. The ice outside was uneven, broken by sharp ridges and hidden crevices. Ren moved carefully, testing each step. Fex and Lumi peeked out from the jacket, while Nari rested against his chest, her tiny wings twitching. The hatchlings had grown stronger in the past few days, adapting to the cold and responding to Ren's instructions. Ren felt proud. They were learning fast, and their intelligence and instincts were becoming more apparent with each passing hour. After a short distance, Ren spotted a small ridge that looked promising. Beneath it, there were scattered fragments of metal and ice formations that could be used to repair parts of the spacecraft. He carefully collected the materials, placing them in his container. The hatchlings chirped and nudged the objects, fascinated by the strange shapes. Lumi tapped a sharp piece of metal with her tiny tail, and Ren laughed softly. Their curiosity was endless, and he was grateful for the company and distraction from the harsh cold. Suddenly, a loud cracking sound echoed through the ice. Ren froze, scanning the horizon. A section of the icy ground had shifted, creating a deep fissure. The hatchlings stirred nervously, sensing danger. Ren quickly picked up his pace, carefully moving toward safer ground. The ice was unstable, and one wrong step could send him tumbling into the crevice. As he navigated the dangerous terrain, Ren noticed something surprising. The hatchlings seemed to sense the cracks before he did. Lumi pointed with her small claw, Fex made a warning chirp, and Nari pressed herself against Ren's chest. He realized that their instincts were sharp and that their senses could complement his own. The bond between human and hatchlings had grown beyond simple companionship. They were learning from him, and he was learning from them. After reaching a safer area, Ren set down the collected materials and took a brief rest. He examined the hatchlings closely. Lumi stretched her wings slightly, testing the cold air, while Fex and Nari explored the immediate area with careful curiosity. Ren noticed small abilities emerging. Lumi could sense subtle shifts in the wind, Fex reacted quickly to sudden movements, and Nari seemed able to detect unstable surfaces before they collapsed. Their survival instincts were impressive for creatures so young, and Ren realized that these abilities could be the key to their survival on this dangerous planet. The day continued with careful exploration. Ren found small pools of melted ice, collected them for water, and marked safe paths for future trips. The hatchlings followed every movement, learning by observation and instinct. Ren taught them how to avoid sharp ice ridges, how to stay close to him during dangerous areas, and how to seek shelter quickly when the wind changed. They were fast learners, and their trust in him grew with every lesson. As evening approached, the wind began to rise, signaling another storm. Ren knew they could not return to the spacecraft quickly, so he searched for a temporary shelter. He found a small hollow beneath a ridge, just large enough to fit the hatchlings and himself. He covered the entrance with ice slabs and snow to shield them from the wind. Inside, he used his heater to create warmth and set the hatchlings close to it. The storm was relentless, whipping snow against the makeshift shelter and making strange sounds as ice shifted and cracked. Ren kept his hands on the hatchlings, sharing warmth, and speaking softly to calm them. They chirped and nudged him in response, showing their trust and affection. Ren realized that their survival depended not only on the environment but on their growing bond and coordination. He had taught them to trust him, and they had taught him to notice details he might have missed alone. During the storm, Ren reflected on their progress. The hatchlings were no longer fragile and helpless. They had adapted to the cold, developed instincts, and were beginning to understand basic instructions. He could see their personalities emerging. Lumi was bold and curious, always first to explore new areas. Fex was cautious but clever, finding small ways to assist Ren in collecting supplies. Nari was sensitive and aware, able to detect dangers before they became threats. Together, they were a team, small but capable, and Ren felt pride in their growth. By nightfall, the storm eased slightly. Ren and the hatchlings returned to the spacecraft with the materials they had collected. The makeshift heater had kept the hatchlings warm, but Ren's body was exhausted from the constant effort. He allowed himself to rest, wrapping himself around the hatchlings as they nestled close. The warmth of their tiny bodies and their soft chirps filled him with a sense of purpose. Ren realized that survival was not just about food, water, and shelter. It was about connection, trust, and teamwork. The hatchlings had become more than dependents. They were companions who observed, learned, and responded to him. In turn, Ren had learned patience, care, and the value of mutual reliance. The icy planet was harsh and unforgiving, but together, they had managed to survive another day. As Ren drifted toward a fitful sleep, he made a promise to himself and to the hatchlings. He would not only survive but thrive with them. They had faced danger together, learned from each other, and built a bond that made the frozen wasteland feel slightly less hostile. Ren understood that the challenges ahead would be greater, but he felt ready. Together, they could face the storms, predators, and harsh terrain. Together, they were stronger. The night stretched on, but Ren no longer feared it. He had the hatchlings by his side, and they had him. The fragile bond had grown stronger, and the first signs of the hatchlings' extraordinary abilities had begun to show. The frozen planet was dangerous, but with trust, intelligence, and courage, Ren and the albino hatchlings had found a way to survive. The frozen winds howled relentlessly across the planet, bending the thin metal of Ren's damaged spacecraft. The heater inside offered some comfort, but the icy drafts found their way into every corner. Ren had been awake for hours, checking the hatchlings, ensuring they were warm and fed. Lumi, Fex, and Nari had become more active during the day, exploring the small interior of the ship, but Ren knew that curiosity could lead them into danger if he was not careful. Ren decided it was time to scout for more supplies again. The spacecraft could not sustain them for long. He carefully wrapped the hatchlings in layers of his own clothing, holding them close. Lumi chirped excitedly, while Fex tried to peek out, and Nari pressed herself against Ren's chest. They trusted him completely now, and he felt a responsibility heavier than any storm he had faced. The outside world was treacherous. Snow and ice covered everything, and the pale green sky made it hard to judge distances. Ren moved slowly, watching for unstable ice patches or sudden drops. The hatchlings seemed to sense every danger before he did. Lumi's tiny wings fluttered when the ice shifted, Fex chirped warnings, and Nari clung tightly to him. Their instincts were remarkable, and Ren realized that their small abilities might be the key to surviving this frozen wasteland. He found a small ridge that held promising debris from other crashes or natural formations. As he collected scraps, a sudden tremor shook the ground beneath him. The ice cracked loudly, and Ren froze. The hatchlings reacted immediately, chirping in alarm. Before Ren could move, a section of the ice beneath his feet gave way. He slipped into a hidden crevice, tumbling down a short, icy slope. The hatchlings, still in his jacket, tumbled along with him, their small bodies pressed tightly against his chest. Ren's heart pounded as he scrambled to regain control. The ice walls were slick, and each movement risked sliding further into darkness. He could hear the faint cries of the hatchlings, their small voices full of fear and confusion. Ren knew he had to act quickly. He used his hands to grip the icy edges, pulling himself and the hatchlings upward. Lumi's tiny claws dug into the ice, helping stabilize them. Fex chirped urgently, guiding Ren toward a safer ledge, and Nari pressed herself closer, sensing the safest path. With careful coordination, Ren finally reached a flat surface. The hatchlings were shaken but unharmed. Ren breathed heavily, relieved that they had survived the fall. He looked at them and whispered softly, "You were very brave. We made it because we trusted each other." The hatchlings chirped back, their silver eyes reflecting understanding and relief. Ren realized that their bond had grown deeper in the face of danger. After the fall, Ren knew they needed a safer place to shelter. He spotted a small ice cave nearby, partially hidden and offering protection from the wind. He carefully carried the hatchlings inside, setting them down on soft snow patches he could use as bedding. The cave was cold, but it was more stable than the surrounding ice fields. Ren immediately set about creating a small warm area using a portable heater and collected ice to melt for water. Inside the cave, the hatchlings explored cautiously. Lumi tapped a small crack in the ice with her tiny claws, Fex examined the walls, and Nari tested the edges of the cave for stability. Rin watched them, amazed by their courage and intelligence. They were no longer just creatures in need of care. They were active participants in survival, observing, learning, and responding to their environment with instinct and cleverness. Night began to fall, and the temperature dropped further. Rin huddled close to the hatchlings, sharing warmth and murmuring words of comfort. Lumi rested her head on his shoulder, Fex leaned against his arm, and Nari curled against his chest. Rin felt a sense of pride and purpose. These small creatures had become a part of him, and he of them. Their lives were intertwined now, and the bond they shared gave him the strength to endure the cold and the isolation. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the cave entrance. Rin froze, listening carefully. The sound was foreign, deep, and threatening. He knew it was a predator native to the icy planet. The hatchlings tensed immediately, sensing the danger. Lumi spread her tiny wings in preparation, Fex crouched low, and Nari pressed herself tightly against Rin. Their instincts were sharp, and they were ready to act. Rin slowly moved toward the cave entrance, trying not to provoke the creature. The predator's eyes glinted in the faint light, and it took cautious steps forward. Rin held the hatchlings close, whispering encouragement. He realized that their safety depended on calm, careful actions. The predator paused, sniffing the air, and Rin used the opportunity to lead the hatchlings deeper into the cave. Lumi chirped softly, distracting the creature, while Fex tapped against the ice wall to create noise, drawing attention away from them. Nari stayed close, sensing the predator's movements and warning Rin with tiny nudges. After tense moments that felt like hours, the predator retreated. Rin exhaled slowly, relief flooding him. The hatchlings chirped softly, their voices full of emotion. Rin hugged them gently, whispering, "We did it. We survived together." He realized that their teamwork had saved their lives. The hatchlings were no longer just dependent on him, they were active participants in survival, using their instincts and emerging abilities to protect themselves and him. That night, Rin and the hatchlings huddled together for warmth. The small cave offered protection from the wind, but Rin knew they would need to find a more permanent shelter soon. He watched the hatchlings sleep, their small bodies still trembling slightly from the earlier scare. Rin felt a deep sense of responsibility. They had trusted him with their lives, and he had learned to trust them in return. As he drifted into a light sleep, Rin reflected on the events of the day. The frozen planet was dangerous and unpredictable, but the bond he shared with Lumi, Fex, and Nari gave him hope. They had faced the fall, the tremors, and the predator together. Their instincts, intelligence, and loyalty had proven invaluable. Rin realized that survival was no longer a solitary struggle. Together, they were a team, small but capable, bound by trust, courage, and care. The night stretched on, but Rin felt a strange sense of peace. The hatchlings were safe, learning, and growing. Their bond had been tested, and it had proven strong. Rin knew that challenges would come again, but he felt ready. Together, they could face the dangers of the frozen planet, relying on each other's strengths and instincts. The first rescue had shown Rin the true depth of the hatchlings' abilities. They were intelligent, loyal, and courageous, and their obsession with keeping him safe was clear. Rin smiled softly, realizing that the bond between human and albino hatchlings had grown beyond survival. It was now a relationship built on trust, teamwork, and mutual care. For Rin, the frozen planet no longer felt entirely hostile. With Lumi, Fex, and Nari by his side, he had found companionship, protection, and hope. The challenges ahead would be many, but he knew they would face them together, stronger than any storm, cleverer than any predator, and united by a bond that nothing could break. The frozen planet was calm for a short while, giving Rin a chance to repair parts of his damaged spacecraft. He had learned to move carefully, ration supplies, and keep the hatchlings safe, but the icy world was unpredictable. Lumi, Fex, and Nari stayed close to him, their silver eyes watching every movement. They had learned to trust Rin completely, and their trust now gave him courage to face the unknown. Rin decided it was time to venture outside for more materials. The spacecraft needed repairs, and the longer they waited, the more dangerous the cold would become. He wrapped the hatchlings carefully in layers of cloth and his jacket, holding them close. Lumi chirped softly, Fex tapped his tail nervously, and Nari pressed against Rin's chest. They seemed aware that the journey would be dangerous, but they did not resist. The wind was sharp, slicing through Rin's layers. Each step required caution, as hidden ice cracks could give way without warning. He moved slowly, scanning the horizon for anything useful. The hatchlings chirped and nudged his hands when he paused, signaling danger or curiosity. Their instincts had become sharper with each day, and Rin realized that he now relied on them as much as they relied on him. He spotted a ridge covered in ice and scattered debris. Broken metal fragments, frozen containers, and icy rocks could all be useful. Rin set the hatchlings down carefully on a small flat surface. Lumi immediately explored, tapping pieces of metal with her tiny claws. Fex investigated the edges of the ridge, and Nari climbed over the fragments, testing their stability. Rin watched them with pride. Their intelligence and curiosity were remarkable, and he could see how their small abilities were growing stronger every day. Suddenly, Rin heard a low, guttural growl. He froze, scanning the horizon. A large predator had emerged from the snow, its thick, armored body moving slowly but deliberately toward him. Its eyes glowed faintly in the pale green light. Rin's heart pounded. The creature was massive, much larger than anything he had faced before. The hatchlings stiffened immediately, sensing the danger even before Rin could react. Rin knew he had only moments to act. He picked up the hatchlings carefully and moved behind a large ice boulder. Lumi flapped her wings and made a sharp chirp, drawing the predator's attention. Fex tapped on the ice, creating small noises that distracted it, while Nari pressed against Rin's chest, sensing the safest path. Rin realized that their instincts and coordination were critical. Together, they might survive this encounter. The predator advanced slowly, sniffing the air. Rin guided the hatchlings quietly, keeping them close. Lumi chirped again, louder this time, and the predator paused. Fex made a sudden movement to the side, drawing its attention briefly away from Rin. Nari nudged Rin's hand, signaling a hidden crevice. Rin moved quickly, sliding into the crevice with the hatchlings. The predator followed cautiously but could not fit entirely into the narrow space. Rin held his breath, whispering words of comfort to the hatchlings. They pressed close to him, trusting him completely. Lumi made a soft chirp, Fex tapped the ice nervously, and Nari curled against Rin's chest. The predator growled, circling the crevice, searching for a way to reach them. Rin realized that his small team of hatchlings was extraordinary. Their instincts, courage, and intelligence had turned a life-threatening encounter into a challenge they could manage together. Using the cover of the crevice, Rin guided the hatchlings slowly back toward a safer area. Lumi flapped her wings, distracting the predator, while Fex created small noises to confuse it. Nari stayed close, signaling dangerous spots in the ice. Rin moved carefully, relying on the hatchlings' instincts and quick reactions. They were not just dependents anymore. They were active participants in survival, thinking and reacting with him as a team. After tense moments, Rin saw a flat stretch of ice that led back toward a small ridge he had marked earlier. He guided the hatchlings there, using every ounce of caution. The predator followed but grew frustrated as Rin and the hatchlings moved quickly yet quietly across unstable terrain. Finally, Rin found a small ice cave, wide enough for the hatchlings and himself but narrow enough to prevent the predator from entering. Inside the cave, Rin set the hatchlings down. They chirped softly, pressing close to him for warmth. Lumi flapped her wings lightly, Fex explored the edges, and Nari nestled against Rin's chest. Rin exhaled, relief washing over him. They had survived the encounter, not through strength alone, but through intelligence, coordination, and trust. The hatchlings' abilities and instincts had kept them safe, and Rin felt a deep sense of pride and gratitude. That night, Rin wrapped himself around the hatchlings once more. The storm outside raged, but inside the small cave, warmth and trust filled the space. Rin realized that survival was no longer just about finding food or shelter. It was about teamwork, understanding, and connection. The hatchlings had become not only companions but allies, capable of sensing danger, responding quickly, and helping to protect each other and Rin. As Rin drifted into a light sleep, he reflected on the day's events. The frozen planet was unforgiving, but he no longer felt alone. Lumi, Fex, and Nari had proven themselves in a life-or-death situation. Their instincts, intelligence, and loyalty were remarkable. Rin understood that the bond between them was more than survival. It was a partnership, built on trust, care, and mutual dependence. The storm outside began to ease, and the cave offered protection. Rin watched the hatchlings sleep, their silver eyes closed in peaceful trust. He knew that challenges would continue, that predators, ice storms, and the harsh cold would test them again. But he also knew that together, they could face anything. Their small team had already overcome the first major threat, and their bond had grown stronger because of it. Rin whispered softly, "We survived today, and we will survive tomorrow. Together, nothing can break us." The hatchlings chirped softly in response, as if agreeing. Rin felt hope rising in his chest. The frozen planet was still dangerous, but he had companions who understood him, trusted him, and relied on him as much as he relied on them. Their obsession with keeping him safe was clear, and he realized he felt the same for them. By morning, Rin and the hatchlings had recovered from the encounter. Lumi stretched her wings, Fex explored the cave carefully, and Nari pressed close to Rin, her small body warm against his. Rin began planning the next steps for survival and repair. The frozen planet would not defeat them. They were clever, coordinated, and connected in a way that made them stronger than the cold, the predators, and the storms. Rin understood something important now. Survival was no longer just about strength or skill. It was about trust, intelligence, and connection. The hatchlings had taught him patience, strategy, and care. In return, he had taught them how to survive, how to navigate danger, and how to trust a human. Together, they were more than a survivor and dependents. They were a team, prepared to face whatever the frozen planet could throw at them. The night stretched on, but Rin no longer feared the darkness. With Lumi, Fex, and Nari by his side, he had hope, courage, and strength. They had faced a predator together and emerged alive. Their trust and coordination had saved them all. Rin realized that the bond between human and hatchlings was now unbreakable, and together, they would face whatever came next with confidence and unity. The frozen planet stretched endlessly around Rin and the hatchlings. The pale green sky reflected off the icy surface, making the world appear calm, but Rin knew better. Every step outside was a challenge. The spacecraft remained damaged, and supplies were running low. Yet Rin felt hope. Lumi, Fex, and Nari had grown stronger, smarter, and more alert. Their trust in him was complete, and he had come to trust them in return. Rin began working on the spacecraft again. The repairs were difficult. Parts were bent, circuits were frozen, and the heater system was barely functional. He cleared ice and snow from the exterior, carefully examining every panel. Lumi tapped a loose wire with her claw, Fex nudged a small metal fragment toward Rin, and Nari pressed herself close to observe. Their intelligence amazed Rin. They were not just watching, they were learning and helping. The process was slow. Rin melted ice for water, ate small portions of rations, and used energy cells sparingly. The hatchlings stayed close, chirping softly, encouraging him in their own way. Lumi was bold, exploring tools and moving objects to help Rin. Fex was clever, learning to identify useful items, and Nari was sensitive, noticing weak spots in the spacecraft before Rin could. Together, they became a team, each with their own role in survival and repair. After several hours, Rin had managed to fix the heating system partially. It produced enough warmth to make the cabin bearable for the hatchlings. He smiled as he watched them stretch and explore, chirping excitedly. The bond between them had deepened. Rin realized that they were obsessed with his safety, but he felt equally responsible for theirs. Their loyalty, intelligence, and instinct were remarkable, and he knew they would be invaluable in the dangerous terrain ahead. Rin decided it was time to explore farther for energy sources. The spacecraft needed fuel for liftoff, and he could not stay in one place indefinitely. He wrapped the hatchlings in layers of cloth, securing them safely. Lumi chirped as if ready for the journey, Fex tapped his tail nervously, and Nari pressed close to Rin's chest. They had been through storms, predators, and falls, yet their courage and intelligence had only grown stronger. Rin felt proud and grateful. The journey was challenging. Snow and ice covered the ground, making each step difficult. Hidden cracks threatened to give way at any moment. Rin relied on the hatchling's instincts. Lumi flapped her wings when the ice shifted, Fex tapped the surface to detect unstable patches, and Nari pressed close, guiding Rin away from danger. Their coordination was extraordinary. Rin realized that their obsession with his safety was matched by their growing skill and intelligence. Together, they could navigate even the most dangerous terrain. After several hours, Rin spotted a small ridge with promising deposits of energy crystals. These crystals could power the spacecraft temporarily, enough for repairs and liftoff. He set the hatchlings down carefully. Lumi immediately explored, tapping crystals with her tiny claws. Fex nudged fragments toward Rin, and Nari climbed over the ridge, assessing the best path. Rin watched in awe. Their teamwork was seamless. Each hatchling had a role, and together they were capable of complex tasks. Rin collected the crystals carefully, using the hatchling's guidance to avoid unstable areas. Lumi pointed out loose rocks, Fex tapped areas that might collapse, and Nari stayed alert for predators. Rin realized that survival on this planet was no longer just his effort. The hatchlings were partners, intelligent and capable allies. Their obsession with him had grown into active participation in survival, and Rin felt a deep sense of connection and pride. As evening approached, Rin and the hatchlings returned to the spacecraft. The crystals were stored safely, and the temporary repairs on the heater and engine allowed for some functionality. Ren began planning the lift-off sequence. He explained his actions to the hatchlings in simple words and gestures. Lumi chirped and tapped tools, Fex nudged metal fragments, and Nari observed carefully. Ren smiled. They were learning quickly. Their bond had transformed into mutual trust, understanding, and cooperation. Night fell, and the temperature dropped again. Ren wrapped himself around the hatchlings, sharing warmth, and speaking softly. Lumi pressed her head against his shoulder, Fex leaned on his arm, and Nari nestled against his chest. Ren realized that the bond between them was no longer fragile. They were a team, prepared for the dangers of the frozen planet and ready for the challenges ahead. During the night, Ren reflected on the past days. They had faced falls, predators, storms, and freezing temperatures. Each time, the hatchlings had demonstrated courage, intelligence, and loyalty. Their obsession with keeping Ren safe was remarkable, but Ren realized he felt the same for them. Survival was no longer just about strength or skill. It was about connection, trust, and teamwork. Together, they were stronger than any storm or predator. By morning, Ren began the final preparations for liftoff. The hatchlings were alert, observing his every move. Lumi tapped on small tools, Fex nudged metal fragments into place, and Nari climbed onto Ren's shoulder, watching closely. They had become active participants, and Ren felt gratitude for their intelligence and instinct. He had trained them, cared for them, and now they were helping him prepare for escape. The spacecraft's engines were partially functional, enough to lift off with caution. Ren secured the hatchlings safely inside, wrapping them in cloth and placing them near the small heater. Lumi chirped softly, Fex tapped a metal fragment, and Nari pressed close. Ren smiled. Together, they had survived countless challenges. Now, they would leave the frozen planet and continue their journey, stronger and more united than ever. Ren activated the engine slowly, testing the lift-off sequence. The hatchlings watched intently, chirping softly. Their obsession with his safety was clear in their every action, and Ren realized that he would protect them no matter what. The spacecraft shuddered as it rose, but Ren's careful preparation and the hatchlings' guidance kept them safe. As the spacecraft lifted from the icy surface, Ren looked at the hatchlings. Lumi stretched her tiny wings, Fex chirped excitedly, and Nari pressed close to him. He felt hope for the first time since the crash. The frozen planet was behind them, and the future stretched out in endless possibilities. Together, they had survived, adapted, and grown stronger. The hatchlings' obsession with Ren was clear, but Ren understood that it was more than attachment. They had become partners, friends, and allies. Their intelligence, courage, and loyalty had transformed their survival into a shared journey. Ren smiled softly, realizing that they were ready for whatever challenges awaited them in the stars. The escape plan had succeeded. The spacecraft floated above the icy world, carrying Ren and the hatchlings safely into orbit. The frozen planet would remain behind them, but the bond they had formed would continue, stronger than any storm, sharper than any ice, and deeper than any loneliness. Together, they were ready for the next chapter of their journey, united by trust, intelligence, and care. The spacecraft hovered above the frozen planet, its engines humming softly. Ren sat in the pilot seat, watching the icy world shrink below him. Lumi, Fex, and Nari were nestled safely beside him, chirping softly and stretching their tiny wings. They had survived storms, predators, and treacherous ice, and now they were ready to leave the frozen world behind. Ren felt a deep sense of pride and hope. Together, they had become more than a human and alien hatchlings. They were a team, united by trust, courage, and care. Ren checked the instruments carefully. The energy crystals they had collected were providing enough power for short bursts of travel. The spacecraft was not fully repaired, but it was functional enough to move safely through the planet's orbit. Ren glanced at the hatchlings. Lumi tapped on a small console with curiosity, Fex nudged a lever, and Nari pressed close to Ren, sensing his focus and determination. Their intelligence and instincts had grown remarkably. Ren realized that their obsession with his safety was now balanced by their ability to act and respond independently. The first challenge came quickly. A thick belt of ice debris orbited the planet, fragments shifting unpredictably in low gravity. Ren maneuvered the spacecraft carefully, guiding it between the floating ice chunks. Lumi chirped, signaling danger as a sharp piece rotated toward them. Fex tapped on a console, pointing out a safer path, and Nari pressed close to Ren's shoulder, sensing vibrations in the spacecraft. Ren smiled. Their instincts were extraordinary, and their teamwork made the challenge manageable. The hatchlings' behavior amazed Ren. Lumi seemed to anticipate the movement of the ice, Fex calculated timing with surprising accuracy, and Nari detected subtle vibrations that Ren could barely feel. Together, they guided the spacecraft safely through the debris. Ren realized that they had grown from helpless hatchlings into clever, intuitive partners. Their obsession with him had transformed into active participation, and their bond was stronger than ever. After passing the debris belt, Ren set a course for a nearby star system. The journey was long, but the hatchlings kept him company. Lumi explored the spacecraft, tapping on controls and levers under Ren's supervision. Fex observed and assisted, nudging items into place and learning from Ren's actions. Nari stayed close, sensing subtle changes in the ship's condition and alerting Ren to any potential problems. Ren felt a deep sense of pride. Their intelligence and loyalty had turned survival into a shared adventure. The hatchlings seemed curious about the stars outside. Lumi flapped her wings and chirped at the distant suns, Fex watched the moving lights with wide eyes, and Nari pressed against Ren, her small body warm and trusting. Ren realized that they were not just surviving, they were experiencing wonder. Their connection to him allowed them to explore safely, to learn, and to grow. Ren smiled. He had never imagined finding companions like this in the harshness of space. Suddenly, an alert sounded. A small meteor field appeared ahead, moving unpredictably. Ren's heart raced. He tightened his grip on the controls, aware that one wrong move could damage the spacecraft. Lumi chirped urgently, Fex tapped a control panel to indicate a safe path, and Nari pressed close to Ren, sensing subtle shifts in the ship's movement. Together, they navigated the meteor field, their coordination seamless. Ren marveled at their instincts. They were more than hatchlings now. They were his partners in survival. After passing the meteor field, Ren allowed himself a brief moment of rest. The hatchlings settled beside him, chirping softly and stretching their wings. Lumi tapped on a console, Fex nudged small items, and Nari pressed against Ren's chest, her trust absolute. Ren felt hope rising in his heart. They had survived impossible challenges, adapted to the harshest conditions, and grown together in courage and intelligence. Their bond was unbreakable. Ren began repairing minor systems in the spacecraft during the journey. The hatchlings assisted in small ways. Lumi passed tools, Fex nudged fragments into place, and Nari monitored vibrations and alerted Ren to changes. Their ability to learn quickly and act instinctively made the repairs faster and more effective. Ren realized that their obsession with him had become a source of strength. They were not only devoted but capable. Together, they could face the unknown dangers of space. As days passed, Ren taught the hatchlings more about the spacecraft. He showed them simple controls, explained navigation basics, and demonstrated how to monitor systems. Lumi absorbed the information eagerly, Fex was careful and precise, and Nari remained vigilant, always watching Ren and the instruments. Ren felt pride in their progress. They had grown beyond dependence. They were now active participants in their survival and journey. One night, as they floated near a glowing nebula, Ren paused to look at the hatchlings. Lumi flapped her wings lightly, chirping in excitement. Fex tapped on a panel, observing the colors and patterns in the nebula. Nari pressed close, sensing Ren's calm attention. Ren realized that their experiences had transformed them. They were no longer just albino hatchlings. They were intelligent, capable, and loyal companions who had become part of him as much as he had become part of them. The spacecraft continued its journey, the frozen planet fading into the distance. Ren and the hatchlings had survived storms, predators, treacherous ice, and meteor fields. Their bond had grown through every challenge, their trust and teamwork strengthening with each obstacle. Ren knew that more challenges awaited them in the universe, but he felt confident. Together, they could face anything. Ren whispered softly, "We have come so far, and we will go further. Together, we are unstoppable." Lumi chirped in response, Fex tapped a control panel approvingly, and Nari pressed close, her silver eyes reflecting trust and affection. Ren smiled. The hatchlings' obsession with him had become a true partnership. They were a team, united by courage, intelligence, and care. As the spacecraft moved into the wider galaxy, Ren realized that their journey had only just begun. The frozen planet was behind them, and the future stretched ahead, full of stars, planets, and unknown adventures. The hatchlings had become more than companions. They were family, allies, and partners in every sense. Ren felt hope and excitement. Together, they could explore, survive, and thrive in the vastness of space. The journey beyond the frozen planet had taught Ren and the hatchlings many lessons. They had learned to trust, adapt, and protect each other. They had faced dangers and survived through teamwork, courage, and intelligence. Ren understood that their bond was extraordinary. The hatchlings were obsessed with keeping him safe, and he was devoted to their safety and growth. Together, they had become stronger than any challenge the universe could throw at them. Ren looked at Lumi, Fex, and Nari, their silver eyes bright and alert. He knew that no matter what lay ahead, they would face it together. Their journey was far from over, but their survival, growth, and unbreakable bond had prepared them for anything. The frozen planet was behind them, but their adventure among the stars had only just begun. As the spacecraft drifted into the endless galaxy, Ren whispered again, "We are ready. Together, we will face the stars." Lumi chirped happily, Fex tapped a console with excitement, and Nari pressed close, their bond undeniable. Ren smiled, feeling hope and determination. They had survived impossible odds, grown stronger together, and were ready for the adventures that awaited them. Together, human and albino hatchlings were unstoppable.